Everybody, and welcome to today's episode on the Information Management Initiative, IMI for short. I'm Jenny Thomas, and I'm the Director of Communication and Insight at IWFM. You may have noticed I'm not Sophie Hooper. She is unfortunately unable to be here today, and we have a different expert from SWG also joining us today, as Paul Janssen is poorly. We'll meet our panel shortly, and in the meantime, we send Sophie and Paul our best wishes. But on with the webinar. And I have a fantastic panel with me from across the sector, including from our technology special interest group and from NEMA BSI. Now, as we said in the introductory blurb of the webinar, the UK Information Management Initiative is just launched early in November, and it focuses on the digital integration of data across the entire life cycle of built and managed environments. And workplace and facilities managers have a real opportunity to increase the value proposition of the profession and the sector by embracing the initiative. And it's really important because, to quote our technology chair, Gordon Mitchell, 72% of the value in return in lifecycle information management is in the operational phase. And I think we'll get to some of that in the session as we go through. So there is a significant role here in driving progress, elevating FM's digital contribution to optimising buildings and assets, and bridging gaps in understanding too. And this is so much more, I hope we'll get to today, than strategic information management being an end in itself, important though that is. It's about supporting strategic decision-making with clear, purpose-driven information, which will lead to significant improvements in sustainability, efficiency, building safety, and I think overall operational excellence, name but a few. So it's a major opportunity for workplace and facilities management to drive positive, lasting change in an area where possibly traditionally seen, FM is sometimes merely an afterthought, even though the greatest gains from info management are in the occupation phase. And just to focus on IWFM's perspective for a bit, the Institute is really wanting, through this work, to inform and engage members on key developments at national and international level. And we've got an international perspective to bring you today, which I'm very pleased about. Today's experts will help us to do that. Advocate for the central role of FMs in centralising data and information management principles as key things to unlocking evidence-based decision-making in driving organisational performance. To support and enable digital maturity and transformation in the sector, including AI and automation, of course. And in doing that, to connect these principles to real-world outcomes. I've talked about sustainability and building safety. A really strong example is in the building safety golden thread work, which is an important route for proof of concept of this idea, given that work's regulatory drive, that work's got a regulatory impetus behind it. And I think this concept we're talking about today is a good proof of concept potentially for that. So our role is to empower members, to you, our audience, including through professional standards, technical guidance and engagement to drive standardisation and great practice. So it's a really good opportunity to get into this topic, I think, today. I've got lots of questions to put to my expert panel. We would love to have questions from you, our audience. So if you do have questions that you'd like me to put to the panel on your behalf, stick them in the Q&A section and I'll pick them up as we go along and incorporate them into our panel discussion. So we'd like this to be interactive. That would be great. Now, the panel. Can I please ask you all to introduce yourselves briefly? Who are you and what do you do? And going down the line, perhaps Gordon, I'll start with you.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Gordon Mitchell. I'm co-founder of a AI and knowledge management platform called Holus. And as Jenny mentioned, I'm the chair of the Technology Special Interest Group with the IWFM. I also hold roles with UK, European and international standards and a number of other industry roles, all orientating around digitising FM and workplace.
Thanks, Gordon. Niels, would you like to go next? Maths, rather, sorry.
Did you say my name? Was it Matt? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Mats Broman, and I'm the Group CEO for ServiceWorks Global, SWG. I can also mention that I have been actually in the board for Swedish BIM Alliance for nearly 15 years, and now I have the honor to be the one that has the chairman of the nomination committee for the board in BIM Alliance in Sweden, and I have been representing the property and facility management sector in that instance.
Welcome, Matt, and thank you so much for standing in at the last minute. And Dan, can I come to you?
Sure, Jenny. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Rossiter. I'm one of the sector leads here at the British Standards Institution, so I focus a lot on anything sort of digital or innovative around the built and managed environment. I'm also an ambassador for NEMA, who were the UK BIM Alliance, one of the key players in what we're talking about today around the Information Management Initiative.
Excellent, Dan, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, before I invite Gordon to introduce the concept of the IMI and tell us a bit about it, I'd like to invite you, our audience, just to give us a short poll. Let's take the temperature and just see where you are with the IMI. Have you engaged with it since it's launched on the 7th of November? Let's just take a quick show of hands on that. Very good. Okay, so we've got a lot of work to do, everybody, because 4% of people have engaged with it, and 96% of our audience today are here to learn all about it. So I can't think of a better introduction to you, Gordon, than an audience that doesn't know and would really like to hear about this. So can I go over to you? Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay, interesting statistic. I guess that's where we find ourselves today, and this is, I guess, our sort of opportunity to kick off something a little bit different and CFM workplace start to maybe drive more of this agenda. So to those, I guess, maybe not aware much, there's what's now called the Information Management Initiative. This launched on the 7th of November, so little more than a month old. It's kind of it's grown out of what was the BIM Level 2 mandate, which, as you can see, was around in 2016, and then the TIP roadmap. I feel like it's the second annex, but maybe later on Dan can remind me. But this kind of evolution is growing alongside things like the standards like ISO 19650 and things like that people may be to some degree aware of. But basically the point of this is this isn't the beginning. This has been going around for many, many years. However, we still find ourselves in this point where the majority of people are not fully engaged with these initiatives. Now, why is that? So you can see from the work, basically we set a task group, now a working group, around, I think it was December 2023. So give or take 11 months of work went in with some of the sector's leads. But really part of the overall understanding was why had things from the past not, bedded in, not landed, not started delivering value to all of us and what were we doing our day jobs. Dan's just messaged me at his Annex B if for anyone that wants to go back to the TIP 2030 piece of work. So you can see these sort of 6 core reasons, and the fact that it's not mandated, I mean, anyone involved with the Building Safety Act now knows it's not something that can be ignored. If your particular stock happened to align to that legislation, it's not an option anymore. But also, particularly at scale, trying to move to these new legislative ways of operating under a timeline stroke deadline, that's also pretty painful for an operating model to change into. So some of this is the kind of anecdotal problem statement, but the overall aim, as it has been for some time, give or take, is very much around enhancing our propositions, enhancing our outcomes, enhancing our service. So pretty much when you look at the aim and the purpose of the IMI, it's all good. It increases the bottom line, it enhances the environment. There is no real downside other than changing into this way of operating, and that is difficult. Change is always hard. So with these being the kind of problems, sometimes to make that change work, you need motivation, and typically we would obviously all term that as the benefits of the process. So trying to look at some of these more pointed benefits, starting to give some of the quantum around how to build things like business cases to take your organization on a journey of change into a better way of operating and a more value-driven outcome. These are the kind of 9 core benefits that we're all, to larger or lesser extents, aware of in the day job of facility management and workplace. So as the term states, Information Management Initiative, it's not a mandate, albeit there's a handling for mandate within the initiative. But basically what the initiative is a landscape of frameworks and structure that kind of give an overarching handling for how we grapple what is a very, very big, challenging situation. Because for full life cycle information to really work, you can't operate in isolation either. So it's not just about you going through your own journey and change, but it's also about a whole sector doing it simultaneously, and across the entire life cycle at that as well. So there's many parts, many handling elements to try and bring that holistic change, if you like. So you can see on this slide the basic structure within the initiative, and trying to, as we've just went through that vision benefits piece, flowing into, we see a route map is a necessity. Like Jenny mentioned, we're talking 2030 at the moment in the timelines. So we all seen, you know, the kind of impact of the likes of the large language models that have become quite prevalent in the world today, ChatGPT and the like, and the change that's made in a very short course of time has been quite significant. So imagine another 5 years from now what we'll be working with, the tools, the opportunities, but really to get the most out of AI, IoT, whatever it happens to be, you really need good information, because then you can trust the outputs of all these amazing technological tools. So you can see here these kind of 3 buckets of different ways of basically building up the competence to support a sector-wide transformation into this new way of operating. And go to the next slide. So we, as I mentioned, 7th was when this was formally launched at the NEMA virtual conference. Some of you may have been there. Going by the earlier poll, I guess probably not. But that's really what this opportunity is, on the right-hand side of this, taking the IMI to you. This is never going to work without the sector owning the change. So this is the first webinar. the first opportunity for us to start bringing this into the world of workplace and facility management. But if it's not seen as something beneficial, then it simply won't happen. So the conversation here, which is different to the NEMA conversation, is it's entirely FM workplace centric. What's the language for us? What's the benefits for us? What's the requirements for us? And how do we start to really change the dial on the FM workplace value proposition? I've said many a time on previous webinars, I think for workplace and FM, it's so well placed to deal with things like ESG. It could become one of the core value driving support services on the planet. And there's a window of opportunity just now that I believe FM kind of embraces that more holistic service support capability almost more naturally than any other support service. So if we can get a good handle on our current information, we're pretty much already able to deal with very complex initiatives like ESG at scale as well. Hopefully I didn't press the button twice. So, like I mentioned, this is a marathon, not a sprint. This is not, here's the initiative, job done. This is very much about, as I say, a journey towards 2030. Also starting to create conversations like this one, starting to get that feedback loop, starting to refine what's in the initiative, and experience is the best teacher. So things like the Building Safety Act, things like ESG, whole life carbon, how does FM start to really get its teeth into these value drivers and feed that back into the initiatives and the frameworks to give more handling. There's an awful lot of activity underway right now in terms of entities like BSI that Dan represents, looking at things like soft landings, looking at things around life cycle data handling. These are all being worked on just now. Some of these standards take a little bit of time to come out, but there's so much of the kind of wraparound underway that I do believe when we get into phases 2 and 3, there'll be so much more support to really help us drive this agenda, both from a NEMA standpoint, but also from an FM sector point of view. And just there's not too much to need to weigh into here, but just to give a little feel for how the kind of overarching governance is set up. The idea and the conversations have been very much with the Construction Leadership Council and consultations with government also, but the idea is that this is industry led. But of course, if we can stand up something that really works at scale, then I would be very hopeful that we can get deeper commitment from government to really drive the UK as a world leader. But you can kind of get a little feel here for how it's envisaged just now to both stand up this initiative, but also maintain it and evolve it as we go. Yeah, I'm going to hand back the presentation. I've skipped one too far, but I'll let Jenny kind of pick up now. Hopefully that gave everyone just a little kind of feel for what we're about to just have a conversation around. But I would definitely say from a technology special interest group point of view, we really want to bring a lot of the support and guidance to help all of you get value out of this new way of thinking as much as anything else. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And I think it's as so much of our audience here is new to this. I think that is really valuable, and one of the things we're really trying to get under the skin of is to pull as much information out of our experts while we're lucky enough to have them on this panel today, and also really to get a feel from our audience as to what it is that they would like us to focus on going forward. We will record today's session and the slides. I think somebody's already asked that, but just for the avoidance of doubt, and make them available to anybody who wants to go back over it and really just have a look at in some more detail of the slides that you took us through there, Gordon. But as a way to get into this, it feels like this is a really positive development, the launch of this initiative, but perhaps there is a sense of addressing the elephant in the room here. Why and how I'm going to say here, do you think this initiative will succeed, perhaps where previous mandates haven't succeeded? I wonder whether I could, Dan, come to you first. Perhaps you might like to take that one on, as you're so closely involved in this.
Yeah, sure, Jenny, I'm happy to. And I think one of the key differences, at least for me, was that the previous one, I think, as Gordon talked about, it was in an annex of a government policy document, so it was hardly visible. And I think what we've done here is that it has more prominence and visibility, and the direction has changed slightly as well. Whereas the original one was this idea of a central mandate, big government says, it's a pretty good idea if you do this. But, only about a third of projects are, publicly funded in the UK. So actually, if you don't work on those sort of projects, you might not even have gotten sight of it or could be bothered to look at it. Whereas what the initiative is doing now is asking you as an organization to create your own mandate for your organization of how you work and how you will align to it. So it's giving you the agency to set up your own pathway to success. And I think that will help people actually own it a little, work out how it works for them, as opposed to having to follow something that's being dictated to from lofty heights that may not be relevant. So I think that greater level of ownership, I think, is the real difference that will turn this into a success.
Yeah, I can see that makes sense. Thank you. I wonder, Matt, whether or not you've got potentially a slightly different perspective on this. I wonder whether there's a perspective you've got from the Nordic experience that compares or contrasts with Dan's point there.
Yeah, but I can see that then from Sweden's perspective, I can refer back to mostly. So it has been to take a life cycle perspective of the building and the assets has been for like 5 years or something like that, that they can see that the industry in themselves can see some benefits of taking control of the building and the assets from a life cycle perspective on different approaches. And the main driver has been that they want to understand how the building and asset is used, not just work with compliance for theoretical plans, how they should act and what they should do in that. They want to act on things, how it's more from a prediction perspective and so on. So that has been the driver to see that can we work more efficient with our building and assets, and also understand how building is used from energy consumption, energy efficiency, and so on. So that has been the main driver. And then they understand that the BIM can bring something value to this, because the BIM is creating the objects, and then the object is the one that will be their assets, and all information will be related to the assets. So that has been the main driver, I would say, for several years in Sweden. But it's always also come up to the mandates around that. Can we make this even faster? So the government has also put into some investigations to see, can we whether the pace of digitalization in the built environment sector, can it be increased, and with the support of legislation. And there is a agency in Sweden that have investigated that and come up with some solutions that, yes, it could be helped. It can drive this a little bit faster. And the most important thing is rely back on a standard. So that is because there has been different standards, different setups. There has been standards, but they are all different. So they have referred back now to work with the ISO 19650 standard as a requirement in the public procurements. So that, I think that is a little bit of a change now in Sweden, that everyone works with both for the in the design and the construction and the facility management phase of the project life cycle perspective related back to the ISO 19650. So I hope that will be a significant change now, and hopefully this will be taken in 2025. That hasn't been a decision then to mandate this, but hopefully it will be. The investigation says that this will be a driver, and has suggested that will be legislation into this.
Thank you, Matt. And that feels like Gordon, doesn't it? A push in the right direction, and the work that this this initiative is doing feels like it's about focusing on the right things and pushing things in the right direction, rather than sort of just having something in Annex B somewhere and expecting people to find it themselves.
Yeah, I can also mention another approach that has been taken into form. Let's say there has been some the BIM has been some construction design focused things. What has been working in Sweden quite a long time now is to put down requirements and demands how information should be delivered to the property and facility management processes. So we're working a lot with our customers to put up requirements into the CDE platforms when they can put up how data should be delivered, in what classification system, how they should be validated, and so on. So that the information delivery through the construction projects is much easier, and the value is to get access to all the objects and all the data that's related to the objects. So it's a lot of things that working with the requirements into the building project, so required and delivered in a good way. It's not the same. An object in a building project is a specific object, but in facility management, it could be more of a system or a function. So it's gathered in another way that has to also be stipulated in some requirements somewhere.
Yeah, thank you. And Gordon, that must be music to your ears in terms of the Swedish experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a degree of carrot and stick around all of this. As Dan mentioned, within the initiative, we've tried to play to a little more of the carrot, because if you take the ownership, if you drive the change, it's typically less painful. However, we need to change the dial on this, both individually and collectively. So that's where legislation, I mean, the Building Safety Act, you know, people lost their lives, is the bottom line. So when things like that are the downside of us not doing this well, then sometimes we need to bring that stick out, and it will hurt to make that change in that way. But yeah, I mean, it is happening. We all have to, I guess, bear in mind that we're quite early on this journey. You know, the point of, and it's still a slightly contentious point, I would add, but BIM is now a relatively sort of well-known term, and people maybe been aware that the B's not in the IMI. So that was a very deliberate move to try and be more life cycle focused. It's not just about the building. And we all know as facility management and workplace professionals that it becomes a much more about user experience, maybe, or potentially, you know, the support and services that could go across, you know, non-building environments, as it were. So we are just emerging into this. Matt's just mentioned 19650, as I mentioned earlier on. This has become quite a pivot point, but it's only 5 years old in and of itself. So we're talking early days as a sector, and that's why the initiative is so important, because we need to support everyone, and everyone needs to be supported in the change that's unique to them, and that's a hell of a lot of variables to kind of encompass. So it is music to my ears to see, you know, ultimately we want these things to be mandated in this country, ultimately, in terms of that sort of governance, but hopefully it's just part of the process rather than a big painful change for people, you know, that we end up with these are the standard terms of contracts, these are the information requirements exchanges, and everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet, as it were, because that just makes it easier, basically.
Thanks, Gordon. I just want to actually, you've touched on standards, both of you, and I think this might be quite a nice point to poll our audience actually on the extent to which they are using or leveraging standards and best practice A in their work. Can we just do that little poll? So just a show of hands here on, do you currently leverage standards and best practice in your day-to-day? Let's just get a bit of a feel for that before I ask.
While the poll is going, do you want a quick standards anecdote?
I do want a standards anecdote. I was about to come to you, so go for it. Thank you.
That's fine. One I particularly enjoy is that people often joke that we have standards for everything. And if you've been on some popular YouTube channels, you'll see that we even have standards for making tea. But it gets that sort of reaction, Jenny. But it's not like how to do a good British cup of tea. It's how you make a standardized cup of tea for testing things like artificial sweeteners or those sorts of things. So there's always a purpose behind the standard in a sort of way. So, but there are lots of ones that can get taken out of context quite often. But ultimately, they're all there to help someone do a job or to do a thing.
Very good. Thank you. Have we got results on our polls? Oh, here we go. So, well, this is encouraging. So 46% of our audience panel are leveraging standards and best practice in their work. 8% people are not. 20% of people, with 21% are not but are planning to, and 25% of people don't know. So 67% of our audience are either leveraging or intending to leverage standards in their work. So I think that's probably very encouraging, actually. And I think we've got a great appetite on this webinar. 96% of you didn't really know about this initiative, but 76% of you are I'm gonna say are pro standards. And I really love I'm an avid tea drinker, Dan, so I love the cup of tea standard there, but I'm not quite sure my idea of a cup of tea would come up to scratch the testing that you require. But can I stay with you a second, Dan, because we've got the UK BIM framework. How is that likely to change in response to this initiative, do you think?
No, it's a good question. So for those who may not know, if you've not been on looking at some of the IMI resources, is that we have things, as Matt's mentioned, like the 19650 series and things, but those are obviously international standards. And what we needed to do in the UK was to effectively contextualize it for our own needs of the way we do things in Britain. So what we have is the UK BIM framework, which is effectively a collection of standards, guidance, and resources that form the UK's approach to doing BIM. So if you go on the website itself, I'll put a link somewhere that someone can put in the chat for our audience later. But when you look at the standards, it's got the 19650s, as was mentioned, but it's also got standards like I think Gordon's talked about BS 8536, which is sort of our design soft landings design for operability sort of standard, that one that very much ties, facilities management with the design and construction process. So it was felt that was important to include in the British way of doing it, because it's not just about data, it's about good collaborative working is the underpinning aspect. And even the early research projects around information management were about how can we use computers to collaborate better, was effectively the premise of it. So it's very much in that sort of spirit. And alongside it has the guidance where actually it's individuals from the community have written it. So the bits on how to use certain aspects are written by contractors or facilities managers or clients or other people who have sat there with their own personal experiences to collate that sort of guidance together. And it's going to change probably in two main ways. The first is going to be it's going to be broadened in a sense, because before we talked about it just being about BIM, and now we're talking about information management. And while principally they very much mean the same thing, information management has the opportunity to go wider into some other areas. And we've already talked about things like building safety, where building safety doesn't specifically say do BIM, but when it talks about things like the golden thread, it talks about have a digital record, make sure that digital record is in an open data format, and it has specific questions. That's an information management topic. So in essence, it'll be able to help people achieve their duties through the Building Safety Act. It'll look at maybe more net zero things. It can also consider emerging technologies like AI and other bits and pieces. The other way it's likely to change is that we are trying to broaden it out, because I think the challenge, which I think is we can disagree or agree with it, that it was design and construction focused. I always disagree with that view. I can see why people got there, but I think it's always had whole life embedded in it. It's just been maybe what people have chosen to see. Regardless, it hasn't always included all the same stakeholders And I think often manufacturers are a great example of the kind of the forgotten group who make really important data sheets and declarations of performance and all these kind of bits about the stuff that goes into some of these data sets, but they aren't talked about in 19650 at all. And then when you get into things like regulators, warrantors, guarantors, the facility management organizations, others that might have got very light mentions, it's about actually maybe broadening the personas out. And actually we're in a pretty exciting phase at the moment where we're looking at who might be one of the first personas that we actually extended out into. And I think we're in quite early talks with actually is facility management one of the first ones that we do to, one, dispel the myths of it being design and construction focused, but also because we've got really good links to the likes of Gordon and others who can kind of inform us what is the guidance that's needed and what are the right standards that support facility management in a data space, so that actually we can get some of those answers very easily. So there's a good chance we'll be engaging with the IWFM and your tech group more to maybe try to ascertain the right persona for facility management, and whether it's first, second, or third, we'll see, because others are interested. But there's a good chance actually it'll have more dedicated resources to you guys as a persona as a result of these changes in the IMI.
Thanks very much, Dan. And I think, without speaking for you, Gordon, I think you would really welcome that potentially.
For sure. I mean, for those of us on this panel, we live and breathe this world. So we see the benefits, we see the opportunity, but it doesn't really work until we collectively seize this, and we need to support that. There's a reason why we function in the way we currently do and don't operate in a more value-centric kind of fashion. And we don't want to make life hard for ourselves. It's just we need to change and evolve into this kind of new way of thinking and functioning. So that's why I've been moaning about this predicament to Dan and others around, you need the runners, if you like. We need to take people on that journey, kind of get them to the point that, the person can fish and you don't need to keep giving them things, as it were. So I would obviously fully support that, but whether it's, as Dan says, first or second, the point is this needs to happen, and IWFM will certainly start to drive this agenda into 2025 and support everyone. But really, it's about, what's the first step on this journey? How can we make it as pain-free as possible and as upside as we can? And that's where good practice guides, things like webinars and the like, will look to support this. But again, it's a feedback loop. The fact that whatever it was, 90% weren't aware of this, we want to understand where you're at. What is the support you currently need? I think we'll look to do deeper engagement with our membership and try and understand, is it level 2 collateral or is it level 7 collateral we need to work on? I really don't know where that's at. So I think watch this space. We'll be looking to really engage a lot more with not just this audience, but the entire membership, and try and understand, how can we support all of us starting to squeeze more value out of our life cycle function.
Thanks, Gordon. And I just Dan, just on your really great outline there of the relationship between this and the BIM initiative. I'm glad you took on the point that it was never intended just to be limited, for example, to design and construction. It was always the case that it was about the whole bit. And I think that is really the opportunity we're discussing here today, isn't it, in terms of how to get that and how to take that on. And I just wondered whether I can just, maybe starting with you, Matt, just get a sense of how do you think this initiative, the Information Management Initiative, is providing more agency to organisations and empowering? How do you think it's doing that? Do you, what do you think you expect to see on that?
Yeah, I haven't read it, to be honest, I haven't read it in details, everything, but I can see the approach and I see the aim for what's after, so that I can see this is exactly what's needed for the industry to get help and to get guidance. And as Dan said, it's not just the ISO 19650, just the framework how to structure and deliver information in a good context. There are a lot of other standards and helpful guidelines that will be helpful during the process, from the design, build, and facility management processes. So that is totally right, and that is also so. But I will see that. So to make this a little bit clearer for the ones that are out in the field, I think it's really important to create some use cases, personas, and take this information delivery from outside in, instead of from all the regulation, and try to build up an understanding. So take it from a use case perspective, a persona perspective, and see if we're going to have this information needs to make a good decision out in the field. What needs to happen around the digitalization, the classification, the gather the data to make this information available for the ones that are going to make the decision. So I think that a little bit another approach, because it's so many standards, so many things, so it's hard to understand where to start with the elephant. But if we can start with the actual things that brings benefits to the table, I think that is a good approach to start with.
That's great. And actually, Matt, that's a great segue into my next question, which I'm going to stick in the direction of Gordon, perhaps, and maybe then Dan would like to comment, which is, Gordon, what concrete activity do you think needs to happen now? What should our members and our audience on this call go away and do after this conversation? There are high-level principles at this stage. How are we going to get to a common way forward? And what do people need to do as their first steps, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think right at the very beginning, try and understand where you are. There's a lot of, we're talking about kind of quite abstract terms in a lot of ways. So inside the IMI, we started to look at the kind of the typical pillars, the people side of things, the data side of things, your technology side of things, your process, the normal ways that we would think of the main domains of facility management. So in a information management perspective, you can understand kind of where you currently are as a operation and organization. And a lot of the time, from what I've seen, is there's a bit of a black box to this. And in that black box creates indecision and uncertainty. And then it's very difficult to make, operation or organization-wide decisions when it's vague. So getting a real concrete understanding of where you are then starts to let you understand where's your quick wins. Where's the things that you can start getting a real good return of investment around. And as soon as you start moving into that type of ROI underpinned continuous improvement, then you'll motor through everything and be going from levels 2 to levels 4 maturity, in whatever way you want to gauge it. But a lot of the time with innovative projects, people start to get centric around the tool rather than the process. So, and I'm sure Matt's will see this all over the place, but if your operation isn't well defined to work with any technology, because ultimately the information management is the part that means the operation is structured in a way that can work with any tech. If they're not, then no matter what technology you start to use, you'll find friction, you'll find, you're not using it to its full potential. I've worked with many technology vendors over the years, and they're continuously saying most of their clients don't even use half of the product that they've purchased and procured. And it's not because they don't want the outcome, it's because it takes that change into fully realizing any tech. So that, to me, it's like with anything, unless if you take your GPS, your sat nav, you might have a destination you want to get to, but it's also equally critical to be able to tell it where you currently are. And if you bring those two things together, then you can start charting your course. Don't expect this whole initiative in your own organization to be a 6-month affair either. It's a never-ending, continuous improvement process, and people come in looking for quick wins or big bangs in a way that's not in tune with the operational need. So that's what I mean about understanding where you are. If you can get rooted, then you can start to see where the path of least resistance and also the big ROI. And if you start getting a good bit of traction in this space, then you motivate people to support you on the journey. And that's when you really change and transform your proposition, in my mind.
Thanks, Gordon. I don't know, Mads, whether you wanted to comment back on that and in terms of your own experience and what you've seen on that. Presumably you are nodding, so I'm suggesting a bit of agreement there.
Yeah. No, but I can see. So I'm agree with everything of that. So you have to start somewhere and have an understanding where. So, when you can't, it's a never-ending story of this. You have to work with this. It's like. You have to start somewhere and understand where are the low-hanging fruits. You can see some improvement and see where you can have some benefits. You encourage the organization to continue to go with this, and so that is something that we have worked with in Sweden quite often to say around digitization. If we work with AI and sensor data and everything to can make some decisions a little bit easier. You have to try and understand it's not so easy to try to think about all of these things in theoretical plans or theoretical. So sometimes it's better to do like a pilot project and can see for one building or for one part and see this is what the technology can bring to efficiency to help with that. And then they can evaluate to see, is this something that we should implement it at scale or should it just be this? And then they can make a decision on that. But it's hard to understand everything of this if you don't try it, and it's new things and that can come up. But I think that has been now in Sweden. Everyone comes into the conclusion, says, yes, it's a new technology that comes in. That they talk about this digital twin is a popular thing now. We talked about connected digital twins, that you're going to have the life cycle perspective of a digital twin that has to be connected all the time, not just when you deliver it from a building project. It has to be maintained and updated all the time. So everything and all the assets should be replaced and updated so you can rely on the data. Otherwise, it will not be a digital twin. It will be just a digital twin when you deliver it. And you also got to be able to understand. And the first thing I said, they want to achieve, the real estate owners say we want to understand how the building and assets are used. How can we do that? Then we have to connect. And then we have to use sensor technology, AI technology to connect. But then we have to have access to the assets to connect them. So it's a little bit of the life cycle perspective gives the opportunity to really connect and see how the building is used. So that is the little bit of the driver and to understand. But take small bits and pieces at a step and have an understanding and have like an information strategy how you can get to this, and start also to put up requirements to the building projects, because if you don't require things how you will have it delivered, you will never get it as you want it. That can be for sure. I have been in so many projects. You can see that it should be just to read in the BIM. But the BIM is not developed if you haven't required for a facility management or property management perspective also. They will not be delivered, so you can just plug and play. So it's a lot of learning about that and see the demands. All the information is there, but you have to structure that in a good way so you can also deliver it in an efficient way. And it's related to the extract, transform, load, the traditional IT things that you talk about, to extract data from one source, to transform it for different purposes, load and validate it before you can use it. So those are the processes that has to be done in this. And classification and standards and guidelines will be very, very helpful to make that happen.
Yeah, so it's quite a disciplined way. I'm very glad you mentioned digital twins, because you tuned into my mind there, Matt. And I know, Gordon, you've done quite a lot of work with the TechSig on this concept too, and it feels like it's connecting it's connecting all of those points up, isn't it? How you kind of test and learn these things, how you define what you've got and where you're starting from. That felt like a really strong principle to kick off there.
I think you know, any good digital twin's not just going to be about the building. It's going to have, you know, full integration with the operation that interacts with it, and information management in the way the initiative and things like 19650, to my mind, that's the foundation of a digital twin. If you don't get that right, then you're going to have, you know, problems as you grow into your digital twin. You're not going to be able to trust what it's telling you to an extent, or you're going to have to do a lot more post-processing to make it make sense. But if that foundation's right, as I say, digital twins, CAFM, AI, it really doesn't matter what technology you choose to use. And I mean, what's going to be the big technology trend of 2027? I don't know, but I can tell you information management will help it become easier for you to use. So it's the gift that keeps on giving, in my opinion. But yeah, we are early days and maturing that to something that we're really driving the agenda on, rather than maybe sometimes it feels for people kind of drowning under the information flow.
Yeah, it seems to me that we've got a sense, and I wanted to come to you on this, Dan, a bit really. It seems to me that we've got quite a sense of urgency on a whole number of things generally in the world now, but also really fast-moving technology and really a huge, really sped-up pace of change. Gordon, you talked about a 2030 target in your setup earlier. And I wondered, Dan, were you feeling a sense of urgency on this, and the need to incentivize a sense of urgency for people to get with this? How are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree. I think it's difficult because no one can keep track of the speed of technology and the way it's going, or even be able to determine, I think, how relevant things are. So I think what I'd maybe recommend is people take that sort of Kaizen approach of, you know, small continuous improvement aspects. And I think very much agree what things Matt and Gordon were talking about earlier, I think, which is about the relevance for yourself. And I think one of the cheeky phrases I used to use before was kind of selfish BIM, or, you know, in this case it'd be selfish IM, which is look at the bits that benefit you in the first case. So, you know, pick an example maybe is that, you know, with condition surveys maybe going across the facility, and actually is there a way of automating the way that you record the results of the conditioning back into, you know, the system, saving you having to record it once and then repopulate it? There's a productivity benefit there. So what is the technology that can help you achieve that productivity benefit? And it's starting, you know, with that purpose in mind, and then seeing if there's a piece of tech that can do it. And then if something new comes along, you then have to gauge, well, what extra productivity does it give me versus the investment of the time, cost, and training into that piece of technology. So you don't have to keep on top of it, because actually, you know, if it isn't fit for purpose, it doesn't meet your ROI for it, then ignore it. Because what we don't want is the people to fall into that kind of magpie syndrome of buying all the new shiny things, then realizing that they actually have no real use for it. I think we saw that, unfortunately, with a lot of people getting you know, drones to do aerial surveying. They went off, had some great fun with it, and then the drone sat on the shelf for 6 to 9 months because they've realized they don't have to do aerial surveys too often. And there's always the benefit of maybe just employing someone with that tech for those instances. You know, if you only need to be on an annual basis, bring someone in who has it. But when we're talking about what Matt's raised there on the digital twin aspects, that is maybe where there's a more continual connection to things. But it's probably thinking of, well, what Gordon talked about near the start. What's the benefit you're trying to achieve? What's the process needed to achieve that benefit? And then how does the technology support you doing the process to achieve that benefit? So the technology is almost tertiary in that sort of sense. Because everything can be done in paper. It's just about what's the advantage of using a computer, and what's the advantage of using AI or digital twins or virtual reality or whatever in that space. But I think it's just to look at it first and see how it works for you.
Thanks, Dan. We've probably got time for one more question, so I'm going to roll a couple of questions into one, because it seems to me that there's a kind of just something I want to touch on with you, and perhaps Matt, you can kick us off with this, is about well, there's barriers to uptake of this, and all of you have touched on that, but also perhaps, so what are the barriers to uptake that you see or have experienced in your organisations? And is there a level of maturity that organisations or teams need to have to join this question? It's a sort of a double-edged question, but hopefully you'll see what I'm trying to get at there. Matt, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can try and start and see. Yes, I think there are a bit of maturity that you're gonna have. You gotta have an understanding, but I think quite often, as Dan said, we start with the technology. Even if we are a technology company, we like technology, but you have to start with the processes and what is the benefit of using these things to make a better sustainable decision out in the field, or to make it as an engineer, or what should be, and what is the information needs to be able to make this decision with the right information at the right time, at the right situation that you have. And we take it from a persona perspective, as I said before, from a use case perspective, it's much easier for people to understand. And if the technology can bring effort to this, or benefits to this decision making that you have to do, then we have our ROI that we can count on and see, yes, this technology will be better visibility, or this will be better data to make the decisions on. Then we take it from outside in, instead of trying to get all the technology, because it's so much technology going so fast. I can guess that all of the real estate owners or departments, they got demos everywhere, and there seems to be like fancy things that to do, but how to use it and how to get it implemented in their day-to-day processes, that is the key thing. Because you can't have thousands of apps and thousands of new technology out there. You have to integrate it to the things that you use day by day, and making sure that it brings benefits to your processes. So I think that is mainly the approach. I think we say in all of both Gordon and Dan and me that take the approach from the benefits that it can bring to the processes. That is the important thing.
Thank you very much. I noticed, Gordon, you've been answering a question from Melanie in our audience, who was actually asking about how to get buy-in from the operational estates team for a CAFM system project on the BIM model that she wants to work on in her organisation. It might be worth just reading the answer out, which is that Gordon says, we created a persona-based benefits framework for FM, which might give her some benefits and a bit of a getting. I raised that because it's a question about how to get buy-in, how to get the sector involved in this, but also how to, I guess, build a business case on either side of an organisation for this activity, and the importance of doing that. Just as a final comment, Gordon or Dan, would you like to just add to that?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to elaborate a little, and Dan and Matt's have already hinted on this as well, is you've got to talk their language. You're not going to get someone else to go and learn the world of BIM or ISO 19650 if they're not motivated to do such. So what's in it for me? Dan's selfish BIM comment or selfish IM, that's whether we like it or not. People are busy, we're stretched. You know, FM generally is not known for twiddling its thumbs. It's high octane, it's never ending challenges. So am I going to take on more hassle, more grief if I don't need to? No. However, if we can motivate, if we can talk very plain language, what's in it for me, and be able to support that journey, then I think you take this, you know, reluctance and transform it into, you know, okay, right, that was amazing, what's next type mentality and habit. And if you can get into that, then you'll become everyone's best friend, because as I said at the beginning, this is the gift that keeps on giving, and the benefits are left, right and centre for when you get into good practice in all of this.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gordon. We've got 1 minute left. I'd like to take a very quick poll of our audience before I thank our panel, see what they would like the Institute to be doing, drive the uptake of the IMI. one thing I think we would urge our audience and everybody in the sector to do is to engage with it and get involved. And that's why, as you said at the top, Gordon, we're running sessions like this, and we're wanting to produce guidance and real meaningful help to our professionals to get in touch and involved in this. And also, perhaps if I can be an informal recruiting sergeant for your special interest group, Gordon, to get involved with the Tech SIG. And yes, Lucy, you're showing also, thank you, Lucy and Winner, the QR code for today's session for anybody who wants to count that against their continued professional development scoring. Have we got a quick result on the poll? Yes, we do. Excellent. So 47% of you would like more webinars. That's very good. We are happy to do those. A third of you would like some workshops on this because it's quite, I think, detailed to get into. 35% of you would like training on it. 41% of you would like technical guidance. I can feel I'm adding myself up to more than 100 here. You would like features in our excellent magazine Facilitate, and you would like case studies. So that is a brilliant lot of feedback there. You might also like consultation sessions, drop-ins and CPD. So I think webinars, case studies, features and training have it. Thank you so much to my excellent panel today, to Gordon, to Matt, and to Dan, and of course to you for our amazing listeners. As a couple of you have already asked, a recording will be available for anybody who wants to listen to it again or to share it with a friend. If there's a single overarching message, get engaged with this concept and get involved with our technology SIG. Speak to Gordon, who chairs it excellently. Thank you so much to our support today, Lucy and Winner, keeping us live and kicking. And if you'd like to hear more about our partners we're working with, we also have a little poll at the end for you. See you all again soon, we hope, and very merry best wishes for Christmas and the holiday season. See you soon. Bye-bye now.